Claude McGavic, the Executive Director for the National Association of Home Inspectors. Today our presentation is about the proposed standards of practice. Before I begin, let me say that I'm not a professional webinar speaker. I'm a home inspector. So if this doesn't turn out right, just send me back to the crawl space and we'll both be happy. The purpose of NAHI is to help you make as much money as possible. And providing a good standard of practice is one way we can help you. And using a good standard of practice helps others keep from taking some of that money away from you. So the goal of this webinar is to explain why the standards are needed, to explain why standards have to be current, and to explain some of the details of these proposed standards. Why do people get home inspections? Well, we know that the purpose of a home inspection is to provide enough information to allow a buyer to make an informed decision. Buyers want to make informed decisions, so they rely on us to give them the information that they need. What do home inspection standards have to do with home inspection? Well, standards tell the clients and real estate agents and attorneys and judges what inspectors do, as well as what they don't do. And standards define and limit expectations that serve as a legal basis for your pre-inspection agreement. Now, both of those points are extremely important, and we'll be discussing them some more in a moment. So if your client has expectations like this, if you deliver this, they're going to be disappointed. So it's critically important that you establish the expectations ahead of time. I've had clients tell me that they thought I was going to inspect the kids' swing set in the backyard. And they were concerned because I had not told them there were stains on the carpet. I've had other inspectors tell me that they expected the inspector to come back in about 6 weeks after the snow melted to check the condition of the roof. So clearly people have different expectations than what we think they should have. If you do not establish the right expectations for your client can beat you to a pulp in court, claiming that he or she wasn't properly informed. So standards help set expectations. If you haven't seen a copy of the proposed standards, you can visit www.nahi.org, click on the members section, and then click on standards. So why change NAHI's current standard? Well, it's 20 years old. I've had some inspectors say, it may be 20 years old, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, to say it's not broke is a myth. It is broken. And there's some other myths we need to take a look at. The first one is that houses are basically the same. But the fact is, houses are not basically the same. For example, in 2012, 3% of the houses in this country had wood siding. 30% had vinyl siding. That's a big difference. So houses are not the same. Another myth is that building materials haven't changed much in the past 20 years. Well, the fact of the matter is that it changed significantly because in 1992, 32% of the houses had wood siding. In 2012, only 3%. In 1992, 19% of the houses had vinyl siding. But by the year 2012, 30% had vinyl siding. That's a major shift. And then look at fiberboard cement siding. It's increased from 5% in 1992 to 15% in the year 2012. There have been some major changes in building materials. Another myth is that housing styles haven't changed much in 20 years. Well, in 1990, 46% of the houses in this country had basements. By 2009, only 30%. And in 1990, 40% were built on a concrete slab, but by 2009, 52% of the houses in this country had a slab foundation. Another myth is that building methods haven't changed very much. But if you've done any EAPS inspection, you know that before the year 2000, EAPS was installed without a drainage pipe. Decks were toenailed to a house. And we didn't even have an international building code in the year 2000. Another myth is that everyone inspects the same thing. Well, the fact is, we don't inspect the same thing. In the Northeast, for example, 84 out of 100 houses are going to have vinyl siding. But in our western states, only 6 houses out of 100 are going to have vinyl siding. So we're not inspecting the same things. Another myth is that most inspectors don't inspect household appliances, and furthermore, they shouldn't. And the fact of the matter is that, according to our colleagues at the American Society of Home Inspectors, who recently conducted a poll, 79.4% of inspectors who participated in the poll do inspect household appliances. And if you'll allow me just to round that up a bit, 80% of inspectors are looking at household appliances. What can be worse than inspecting household appliances? Well, inspecting household appliances without a standard of practice. That's why we need one. In fact, inspecting anything without a standard of practice is one of the worst mistakes a home inspector can make. So why have standards? The standards establish expectations. They establish a basis for comparison. They establish an accepted procedure. And they establish common reporting format. As a home inspector, you must set the expectations for your client in 2 places: in your pre-inspection agreement and in the home inspection report. If you don't set the expectations, you're playing a game of you bet your career. And these are the only 2 places where the home inspector can clearly establish expectations that can help that inspector with the report: pre-inspection agreement and the report. We've kicked around this term standard of practice. What does it really mean? Well, a common definition is it's the minimum uniform methods for the inspection of a home, including a list of the systems and components to be inspected, and the requirements for reporting the findings. So standard of practice has 3 main parts. It identifies the methods for the inspection, a list of the things you're going to inspect, and how you should report it. How many of you know life's not fair? Even if you follow the standards of practice, an opposing attorney can claim that the client expected more. How? By relying on a legal doctrine called standard of care. Here's the definition. Standard of care is the level of skill, care, and diligence exercised by prudent members of the same profession, conducting business in the same locality, and doing the same kind of work. Here's an example. If a majority of the home inspectors in your city check the mailbox flag, you better check the mailbox flag also, even if it's not part of the standards of practice. Why? Because the courts have ruled that a client may have a reasonable expectation that a provision of a specific service is common practice, whether it's part of a standard of practice or not. They are entitled to that service like everyone else. So here's some more practical examples. If inspectors in your city check the TPR valves, or the smoke detectors, or the lawn irrigation systems, or anything else, if the majority of them check those things, you better check them too, even if those aren't in the standards of practice. But there are even greater expectations that a client may have. They come from a doctrine called best practices. The definition of best practice is a little long, but it's got some important points. It's a method that has consistently shown superior results to those achieved with other means. It's a process of following a standard way of doing things that multiple organizations can use. And it's a way to maintain quality as an alternative to mandated legislative standards. So let's break this down a little bit. The first part of the definition is that it's a method which produces superior results. How many of you use a moisture meter? Why do you use it? Put your hand on the wall and tell if the wall is wet, but a moisture meter gives you superior results. You may use instead, or you may also use a circuit tester. Now, you can stick the screwdriver in an electrical outlet and see if it's hot or not. I don't recommend that, but this gives you superior results. Some of you may include photographs in your reports. You do that because you get a better report, superior results. Another part of the definition of best methods is some method multiple organizations can use. And one example of that is building codes. We don't use the term building codes as home inspectors. We say good building practices. But if we think about it, who uses building codes? Architects, engineers, contractors, insurance companies, issuing insurance, real estate agents look at building codes. All those different organizations can look at building codes, including municipal governments. So it's a method that multiple organizations can use. But this is the part of the definition that most often impacts home inspectors. Best practices are generally considered to be better than state-mandated standards. Why is that? State standards typically remain unchanged even when better ways are developed. Just like our standards are 20 years old. Some state standards are 25, 30 years old or more. They adopted the standard, set it on the shelf, didn't look at it again. And what's happened in the meantime? Change has occurred. Change in building materials, change in building methods, change in building styles, all those things have changed, but the standards that the state originally adopted haven't changed. So new standards in other places have been developed, and the attorneys simply say, well, these new standards are better, it's really the best practice, so we're just going to ignore state standards and opt for these better standards. So to prove a case against the home inspector, attorneys can simply ignore the state standard and declare that a best practice was available and should have been used, and the courts buy that argument. The plaintiff's attorneys can dismiss adopted state standards by claiming best practices should have been used. Always use the best standard of practice you can find, because that's the one that's going to be used against you in court. Now, let me qualify all of this at this point. If your state has a state standard of practice, use it. You have to use it. If you don't use it, you're breaking the law. But most of those state standards allow you to exceed the standard. Use the NAHI standard to exceed the state standard. That way it becomes a better practice than what the state's using. It becomes a best practice. So the goal of NAHI in this effort is to make this the best standard of practice in the entire industry. The purpose of the NAHI standards is defined at the front of the document, and it says the purpose is to define and clarify the purpose, conditions, limitations, exclusions, certain terms relating to a home inspection. That's why inspectors should not inspect anything without a standard of practice, and why that standard should be recognized as the best standard, or the best practice. So what do the proposed NAHI standards look like? You've seen this list before. The purpose and scope of the standards of practice is basically the same that it has been in the past. Section 1 tells about the performance and content. NAHI plans to have inspections performed according to these standards, and this is what you're supposed to look at. Section 2 lists a scope of practice. It tells all the systems and components, and that's expanded in Section 3. Section 4 tells about how this is to be applied. It's to be applied to single-family homes, duplexes, multifamily homes, condominiums, manufactured homes. I don't care if it's a cave. If it's a single-family home, these standards could be used to inspect it. Section 5 says that we're supposed to determine the condition. Section 6 says that this is a subjective inspection. What does that mean? It means it's our opinion. We're not trying to prove anything. We're not measuring anything. We're not comparing anything. We're just giving our opinion of the condition that we see. It's purely subjective. Section 7 says that we recommend that these standards be used by our members. And why do we say we recommend it? First of all, we're required to follow the state standard. And on top of that, we recommend that ours be used as a better standard. But keeping in mind, we have to follow the state standard first. And then Section 8 says this is not limiting. If you want to do termite inspections or mold inspections or radon inspections, that's fine. Those have their own standards we have to follow. And then Section 9 says that exceeding these standards is not prohibited. You can exceed these if you can find a better one, but you're not required to. So this is basically the same purpose and scope as the current standards. That maintains consistency with what we've done in the past, and also with the standards of other associations and the states. So that helps maintain consistency, and courts like consistency. The proposed standard lists 7 kinds of limitations and exclusions. You're pretty familiar with most of these. Section 1 says this is not a warranty or guarantee of any kind. An inspection is not a compliance inspection. We're not inspecting for code violations. Section 3 says there are lawful exceptions. That simply means if your state has a law, you have to follow those standards. Then you don't have to follow NIHE standards. But again, we recommend that you do because we feel like these are better standards than what the states adopted. Section 4 says, talks about the general kinds of things that we're familiar with. We don't have to move personal property. We don't have to take equipment apart. Those kinds of general limitations. Section 5 says there are some things that are not operated or inspected. For example, we don't inspect, operate or inspect elevators. We don't operate or inspect emergency generators, those kinds of things. Section 6 says that some things are not determined or measured. We don't measure voltage, we don't measure amperage, we don't measure flow or volume or pressure. We don't determine those and we don't measure them. And then Section 7 says there's some information we just don't provide. We won't provide information about surveys or about easements. We don't tell the client that the guy living next door is a registered sex offender. A lot of different kinds of information we don't provide to the client. But those are basically the same that we've had in the past. And that maintains consistency. Remember, limitations and exclusions help you set expectations. They tell the client what you do and what you don't do. And consistency is important for the courts. There's a little added protection here also. Certain terms used in the limitations and exclusions are defined in the glossary at the back of the proposed standards. Again, we're maintaining consistency by saying that this is what the words mean throughout the standards and in the report and in the inspection agreement. This is how we define the terms that we use in our industry. Section C has 3 sections, and this is where the biggest changes occur in our standards of practice. Section 1 says that we're supposed to prepare a report which describes the types and components, types and conditions of components. And we've done that for years. Section 2 says if the component is deficient or old, the inspector has to report 5 things. We'll get to those in a moment. And then Section 3 says we're supposed to list items that were not inspected and tell why. Section 1 says we're supposed to describe the type and conditions that we find, the type of components and the conditions. I've seen a lot of inspection reports that list windows and doors and walls and floors and ceilings and fireplace, but none of them tell the type. What type of doors? Solid core doors or solid core doors? What difference does it make? What kind of windows does it have? Single hung windows, awning windows, casement windows, electric panels. Are any of the electric panels Federal Pacific electric panels, or PE panels? Does the house have polybutylene pipe? A lot of the newer inspectors are just listing the major components and not telling the type of component. Those standards of practice clarifies you're supposed to tell the type as well as the kinds of components found in the house. And then when it comes to describing the condition, a lot of inspectors use the word satisfactory. Now, satisfactory to you is not the same as satisfactory to someone else. And to prove that, ask your wife or your husband what they think about your favorite pair of blue jeans. You may think they're satisfactory. They may think they're rags and need to be thrown away. And it's the same thing when it comes to a house. You may think something is fine, but the client may ask you like, blind or something. Obviously, there's a problem with it. So using the term satisfactory means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So be careful about the word that you use to describe something. Reporting what is old or deficient. This is where a lot of the home inspectors are freaking out when they see these proposed standards. This section says that you're supposed to explain why you believe something is old or deficient. You're supposed to report the location of the defect. You're supposed to recommend some kind of action, maintenance, repair, or replacement, those kinds of things. You're supposed to identify a consequence for not following up. And number 5, you're supposed to recommend the kind of person who can provide a good evaluation and estimate. Someone who can give a good second opinion. Let's break this down a little bit. Why explain why you think something is old or deficient? Because you're the expert. Not the brother-in-law who tags along to the inspector. Not the seller's agent. Not the local handyman. You're the expert. And if you just say, there's something wrong with that, what's the brother-in-law going to say? Well, I can fix it. And what's the seller's agent going to say? Well, it's in working condition. And the list goes on and on. How many times have you been thrown under the bus by a handyman or a tradesman or something? To tell why you think something is wrong, not just that you think something is wrong. Here's an example with old. You see a water heater and it's 30 years old. You need to tell the client it's 30 years old. But you also need to tell them it's old because water heaters generally last 12 to 15 years. This one is not only old, it's really old. And what is the implication of that? It's going to fail. Well, the seller's agent may say, but it's in working condition, so then you turn to your client and say, how much you want to bet and quit before the closing? But the implication is that this is an old water heater. You tell them they only last about 12 to 15 years. This one's 30 years old. Let them figure out the rest of it. But if you don't tell them you think it's an old water heater, the seller's agent certainly is going to tell them that. Even if it's in working condition, if you don't tell them that something is old, because they are in the town, then you may end up hearing a complaint about it. There's at least one statement the country said, the real estate agents have said, that's not fair. If it's working, it's working. If that group wants to keep inspectors from speculating on the age of something, or suggesting something that fails soon. For most of us, it's a good idea. If it's old, we want to find out if it's old. How about an older deck? In 2010, there weren't any codes for how to build a deck. So a lot of decks are just toenails to the back of the house. But you know that structural failure with decks is the leading cause of structural-related deaths in the United States in residential homes. So decks, older decks, even those built back as late as 2010, didn't have any codes for their construction. So you need to let people know if it's an older deck that you have it checked out. Not a dishwasher that's out of warranty. It's working, but you're not sure it's working just right. What do you say? You only wanted it. It's out of warranty. Why is it older just because it's out of warranty? And if the manufacturer only has confidence in the product for 2 years, and you give a 2-year warranty, why should you think it's going to last any more than 2 years? Especially if it's making some kind of noise or doing something that's an out of strength. So simply suggest to the client, this is an older dishwasher, and it's no longer covered by a warranty. You might want to consider having it serviced prior to using it, and you might want to consider purchasing the client's service contract before you buy the house. Your opinion counts most when it's upfront and in writing. If you see compacted insulation in the attic, if you hear a noisy well pump, if you see indications of heavy wear and tear, any of those things, put it in the report. Because if you don't put it in the report, it can come back and bite you. Let me give you a personal example. When I first got started, and I'm in Florida, most of the houses here are masonry, concrete block. Did a number of inspections, and I was getting callbacks from my clients saying, "There's cracks in the outside of my house. You missed them. I've got some problems over here." And I'd go back and look, and there's stair-step cracks in the outside. And I would explain to them, I saw those, but they're just cosmetic, it doesn't mean anything. And the clients would say, "Yeah, right. You just missed it. Now you're trying to cover up and say it's cosmetic. I got some major problems here, and you're going to pay for it." So I learned in a hurry. The first thing I did when I got to a house was to walk around that house and look everywhere for nothing except a crack. Once I found a crack, I was good to go. Because then I could report the cracks in the exterior of the house that appear to be cosmetic, shrinkage cracks, common in this area, and all the other verbiage I put in it. But if I didn't tell the client there was a crack there, even if it was cosmetic, later they wouldn't believe me. So if you see something at the house that's a little unusual, put it in the report. Explain it away, but make sure you cover it so that they know that at least you looked at it. Report the location of the defect. Don't assume the client can find it. How many of your clients do you think know what an evaporator coil is? Know where to find it. So make sure your client can find the defect or the item that you're describing. That's the second thing you have to do if you think something is deficient. Third thing is you have to recommend a course of action. And that might include asking to sell it. You might recommend repair or upgrade or monitoring, second opinion, or customary maintenance, whatever it is that you think is appropriate. Make a recommendation for a course of action. The fourth thing is warn the client not to ignore the conditions that you find. How many of you inspected a house, and then 2 or 3 years later you get a call to inspect the house and turns out to be the same one for another buyer? And as you start your inspection, you realize they're not going to fix the stuff you found 2 or 3 years ago. Just ignore it once you get rid of it the first time around. It's important that we warn our clients not to ignore what we tell them to do. An insurance underwriter told me that his company represented a home inspector who then inspected the home and told the client use the furnace, you could get sick or you could die. Consult with a qualified technician about replacing the furnace. The closing went through, the buyers moved in. A couple months later, it got cool one night. They turned the furnace on, woke up and died. The family, the children, sued everybody involved. Sued the realtor, this is the seller, this is the home inspector, and some others. When it came to the trial, the judge was looking over the home inspector's report and said, the report says, the furnace is defective, do not use the furnace, use the furnace, die, have a qualified furnace technician replace the furnace. He looked at the inspector and he said, why are you here? You've done everything you could possibly do. You even warned them they could die if they used it. They ignored you. You're dismissed from the case. So it's important now, nationwide, that we learn to warn our clients not to ignore our advice about something. Another reason for that is sometimes the seller and others can dismiss your comments as just being doesn't matter. It's been like that for years. Never heard of that. It's easy for others to dismiss your comments if you don't describe why you think it's a defect, and if you don't tell them what can happen if it's ignored. It's hard to ignore someone when they say, use this and you might die. There's a cause to that part. The fifth thing we have to do if we find something that's questionable is to recommend a suitable expert. Now, I've heard a number of reports where the first person that's recommended is a licensed engineer. And what's it cost? They're very expensive, and sometimes they're not needed. If you need a handyman to do some caulking around the window, don't recommend a licensed contractor to do the caulking. Caulking required by license in the state. Use the right kind of expert for the right kind of job. It may be a contractor, it may be a service company or an appliance, it might be a plumber, an electrician, or handyman. It could even be the homeowner. Ask the homeowner to change the light bulb. Section 3 says, tell what you did not inspect and why. Why? Because it helps establish the scope of the inspection, it helps define the expectations for the client, and it clarifies limitations and exclusions. So we've got more than 100 limitations and exclusions in the proposed standards of practice and user's guide that are able to. One of the best defenses against false expectations is to use this phrase. Let's just use mailbox. The mailbox was not inspected, and inspection of the mailbox is not included in the inspection fee. What does that say? It says, I didn't inspect the mailbox. You didn't pay me to inspect the mailbox. I don't inspect stuff I don't get paid for. That's pretty clear. You didn't inspect the mailbox. Why? You didn't pay to inspect it. The judge is not likely to make you hold you responsible for something. If you said, I told them I wasn't going to do it, and I didn't charge you for it, they can't expect me to work for free. So use that phrase if you can. These reporting requirements are already part of some inspection standards, and they've been considered by at least one state as a minimum standard, and there's another state that's contemplating licensing. I'm sure it's going to be looking for the same kind of thing. So that means that these requirements, these 5 new requirements for reporting, are going to become best standards whether we adopt them or not. So we need to get in front of this story and believe in it. These standards give us more flexibility, because there are dozens of reasons to limit or exclude inspection components because we think it's not safe to inspect those items, or we can identify some of the reasons another one documentation that would keep us from inspecting those items. Here's a list of some of the proposed changes for the standard of practice. In the sites section, window well curbs, or above-grade extensions, exterior cellar or basement doors, and their related curbs and above-grade extensions have been added. We checked those things in the past as home inspectors, but they were never part of the standard of practice. This was one of those things where it was a standard of care. Everybody did it, everybody expected those things to be checked. Now they're included in writing. Foundations, we've included crawl space and unfinished basements. Sometimes inspectors don't know if they're in a crawl space or an unfinished basement. In Florida, I've never been in either one, so I don't know about that. The additions to this section include ledger board, hangers, sill plates, shims, connectors, fasteners, stair foundation, crawl space, and basement drainage. Inspectors have looked at those things for years, but again, they haven't been listed specifically. But now we're listing those so that there's no false expectations about it. We should look at some other stuff also. These are the things we look at. I've had some inspectors say, well, how am I supposed to check stair foundations? Check them the same way you check chimney foundations. How am I supposed to do that? I don't know. Been in the standard for 20 years. We're under the house looking at foundations. Check around where the chimney is and see if we're seeing problems. In the exterior section, which now includes carports and attached and detached garages, this is going to be different for some of them. Some of your states say that you're not required to inspect attached buildings. The standards of practice say, go ahead and look at it. A lot of inspectors look at them already. This says you need to look at them unless there's a legitimate reason why you can't. Added to this section, the exterior, is window and door casing, sills, thresholds, hardware, and install screens. How many of you looked at those in the past? We all have. Now they're part of the standard. We're also supposed to look at crawl space skirting. Well, why? The why is because the skirting is there to keep small animals out. And we've never had a client call you and say, there's animals under my house. You can understand the importance of not reporting that. Which, crawl space skirting, the chimney accessories, the rain cap, the spark arrestor, those kinds of accessories that are installed or changed. In the current standard of practice, there are two roof sections. One deals with roof cover, the other deals with the attic and the structural part. Those have been combined with this standard, and a couple of items have been added. Visible fasteners. How many of you have been in the attic and looked up at the rafters and see a row of nails down beside the rafter? Or the truss. What does that mean? It means the deck's not nailed down. They missed. So if you see visible fasteners in the attic, might face the client know that needs to do a little bit of repair work with the roof. Need to tell the client where to find the access to the attic and what kind it is. Is it a hatch you pull downstairs? Is it a door someplace? Tell them how to get into the attic and what kind of access it is. Inspected a house one time here in Florida, a new house, and I reported to the client at the end of the inspection that there was no access to the attic, no hatch to the attic, so I couldn't inspect it, but there was no insulation up there. And he said, well, how do you know there's no insulation if you couldn't get up there and look? Think about it for a minute. If you can't get up there and look, how would you get up there to put the insulation in the attic? And besides, I had used to look down there and there was no insulation up there. Turns out the builder had not put a hatch or insulation 7 attics, and that's what we figured out. So, gotta find where to find the access, and that kind of thing. And then also added to this section is attic insulation fans and airflow chutes. Those are the devices that keep the insulation from going down into the socket and blocking the airflow. It's something that we have to report on that. The electrical section, a number of things have been added: panel disconnects, circuit breakers, fuses, low bars, bus bars, ground straps, conductors, conduit. We've looked at those things for years, but they haven't been listed as inspection components. Why list them now? Because we're setting the expectations for the client. Client, these are the things we look at. Did you look at this? No, it's not in the list. This is the list. These are the things we look at. Switch and receptacle cover plates and enclosures. How many of you found an open junction box? Where does it say in the current standard we're supposed to report open junction box? It doesn't. And the proposed standards, it does. And then finally, overcurrent protection devices and disconnects. We haven't been required to look at those in the past. Now we're supposed to look at them. It doesn't mean take them apart and dig into them. It means fastened to the side of the house, functional. We're supposed to take a look at those devices. I've seen a number where they're just kind of hanging on the wall, not even attached to the wall, and they're not doing anything. Another section is plumbing. Section 6 is plumbing. Added to this section is drains and injector and sump pumps. It's amazing that in all these years we've had standards, we've never listed drains as something we're supposed to inspect. Section 7 is the heat section. We're supposed to talk about the fuel components, service conductors, grounding, disconnects, those kind of things. And then for gas or fuel oil, the pipes and tanks and valves and flues and vectors and those kind of things that go with fuel oil and gas. Also, we're supposed to look at filters. There's one item that's been taken out of this section, and that's auxiliary heating units. Those heaters are plugged in the wall with the rooms. Those don't have to be inspected anymore under the proposed standards of practice. Again, these are items that we've looked at for years. We've just listed them now so that we can define more clearly exactly what we do. Section 8 is the AC section, and similar to the heat section, we're supposed to tell what we can tell about the electrical service to it. And if it's a hardwired unit in a room, a older unit that's hardwired, it's not going to plug in the wall, but hardwired, we're supposed to look at those, and also filters. Now, these are the additions to the standard. Still have the old other parts of the standards that remain, which are the additions that we're talking about here. At the interior section of the standards, we've added wall, ceiling, and floor structural components where they're visible. Around the house, you can look up and see the flooring or the subfloor. You're supposed to report on that. We have that. If you're in the garage and you can see the back wall of the garage, see the framing, you report on it. If you get seen into a chase somewhere inside the house, if it goes up through the house, see the structural numbers there, see something wrong, you can report that. Also added to this section is window and door hardware and trim. So what is that? And then if you inspected houses where the door is lined and the windows don't open, it does the trim. Sometimes it's been painted shut, sometimes the caulk is caulk shut. So we're supposed to check window and door trim and hardware on these proposed standards. And then built-in cabinets have been added in the past. We've looked at countertops. cardboard cabinets can suck water up and swell. How many of you know that the bonding agent is formaldehyde, formaldehyde base, and after a number of, about 20 years or so, that formaldehyde starts to off-gas and stay in the room in the house. So we're supposed to look at cabinets. And then finally, shower stalls and tub surrounds again. In the past, a lot of inspectors have disclaimed finding shower stall and tub surround leaks. But we still need to inspect them because we can't tell for sure that they will check. And then we come to the glossary. The glossary helps set expectations. It allows you to define terms for the court. The current standards have 27 terms defined, but the new standards, which you're looking at now, define 63 different terms. Choose your words carefully. Whenever possible, words or phrases defined in the glossary should be used in your inspection report and in your pre-inspection agreement. Maintain that consistency all the way through, so there's no ambiguity when you get to court if you're in that there. Everyone should be able to understand what you're talking about. If you need a CPU credit, you can send me an email and tell me the most significant point that you learned from this presentation. To earn that CPU credit. If you have any questions, you can contact me and I'll be happy to try to answer your questions for you. In conclusion, standards of practice are like components of a house. They have to be properly maintained. And from time to time, portions have to be